right, welcome back once again, everybody. I'm Don Seifrit. It's the Dr. Tree Fruit and Don podcast. It is Wednesday, August 16th, and I'm here with Dr. Kari Peter. Say hi, Kari.
Hello.
And Dr. Greg Krawczyk. Say hi, Greg.
Hello, everyone.
All right, so we've got a little bit of a pre-harvest update for apples. Since it is the middle of August, peach season is winding down, I think, for most of us. We're looking ahead towards apple harvest. And Kari, you've got a little bit of advice for pre-harvest applications to manage post-harvest concerns. Is that accurate?
That is correct. I have some good nuggets of wisdom to share with folks as far as what they should be keeping in mind at this time of year. Depending on where you are in the state, you may or may have not received a lot of rain this year, especially from mid-June onward. In the south central part in Adams County, Franklin County, York, it really depends on where you're located as far as where you had the rain, but it seems like it's been consistently wet over the last 2 months. But with that said, is that I'm seeing bitter rot out there now. So it's a bitter rot season. So I'm seeing rot show up pretty good. And as we move into harvest, bitter rot is not the only rot you need to be thinking of. What we're finding with our post-harvest research is that the dominant rots showing up in post-harvest start in the field. These are rots like bullseye rot, alternaria rot being probably the most important. And the only way to limit these rots is to make sure that you have good fungicide coverage on those fruit prior to harvest. And what's prior to harvest? Well, I would say within 2 weeks of harvest. I mean, I know how harvest works out there. You're putting the bins in the orchards ahead of time, and there's going to be accessibility problems with your tractors and stuff with regards to the bins. So you need to be mindful of timing your fungicide sprays accordingly. So I'd say within 2 weeks of harvest, closer the better, as putting on your last fungicide sprays. So what would be those last fungicide sprays? Number one would be Maravon. That's probably the best. It has a 0-day PHI. It is labeled for controlling post-harvest diseases. It's an expensive product, and I understand that, but you will get a lot of bang for your buck for this product. And the packers will be very grateful, especially for those of you who cooperate with packers. Even if you keep your own stuff in storage, it will pay off in the long run as far as keeping your fruit, maintaining the quality of your fruit in the long run. The other options are Luna Sensation and Flynn Extra. Those have a 14-day PHI. It's the trifloxystrobin in those products and paraclostrobin in the Maravon that is really doing the heavy lifting for the rot control. So this is why those three products really work the best as far as a pre-harvest fungicide spray as you are nearing your harvest window. The reason why I have constantly beat the drum about these pre-harvest sprays is that the big rot that occurs during storage, that is your resident rot or your resident fungi, is Penicillium, the Penicillium species, which cause blue mold. Blue mold is the rot. The importance of blue mold is that the fungus produces the mycotoxin patulin. Patulin is tightly regulated in the processing industry. So if your fruit are going towards processing, whether that's for juice or other processing products, your fruit will be tested. And if your fruit exceeds that patulin limit, it will be rejected. A way to limit that potential for blue mold contamination is putting on that pre-harvest spray, because what I'm seeing over the years is that you may have something like bitter rot that shows up in storage, and bitter rot can be an entry point for the blue mold spores, because the blue mold needs a wound. It needs some kind of natural opening, whether that's a wound or a poke from as far as from a stem puncture. It can't force itself into the fruit. So a rot is an open wound, and blue mold will take advantage of that. It'll take advantage of that rot, and there's lots of blue mold fungal species that cause blue mold that are very aggressive, and they can take advantage of these rots that start in storage that basically occurred. They had their infection starting in the field. So just be mindful of that. Over the last few years, I've seen a lot of issues with people seeing blue mold contamination as a result of, basically rots starting in storage due to stuff like bitter rot. So something like Maravon or Luna Sensation or Flynn Extra will help prevent that from happening, as far as bitter rot showing up or another rot showing up, and then creating that entry point for the blue mold. Everyone who has a cold storage has blue mold. This is a really tough fungal species or fungal group of fungi that it's really tough to get rid of in storage. So don't think you don't have it. You have it in your cold storages. So that is just my public service announcement for the packer, as far as the growers that send fruit to the packers, or for folks that keep their own fruit in cold storage. Make sure you have some kind of fungicide on at harvest. And the other thing is that be mindful of how old that fungicide spray is from the time you applied it to the time you harvest, because what we're seeing is that the biggest issues coming out of storage is when there's 40 days in between the time of that last fungicide spray and the time that there's harvesting. So I'm looking at you, Fuji varieties, or Pink Lady, these late varieties that are harvested in October and possibly early November. So be mindful, not just of stuff that's going to be harvested in September, but the apples that are going to be harvested later on. So just be mindful of that. As far as organic options, we're limited. Sulfur is an option, of course. OSO, which is a polyoxin desalt, and the biological or bacterial-based products like Serenade or Double Nickel. And hopefully, if you are farming organically, you're moving these fruit fast and you aren't keeping them in storage. Hopefully, these fruit are being moved very quickly, because there is kind of an expiration date with these products. They don't last long. We do see the limitations of them in contrast to the more conventional products. So that is my spiel about chemicals to be applying right before harvest. Now, as far as what you should be doing culturally, as far as cultural management, I have some bullet points to go over as far as what to keep in mind to reduce post-harvest rots culturally. Number one, should rotting fruit be encountered within the tree while you're at harvest, instruct your pickers to drop those rotten fruit to the ground. This is going to limit disease spread within the canopy, and especially if you have multiple pickings within your orchard, this will definitely slow down any potential contamination due to those rots. It's okay to be dropping fruit to the ground. Mother Nature will take care of it. It's not going to affect you later on. Be mindful of the second point is being mindful of more mature fruit. The more mature fruit, the more susceptible it is it's going to be to storage diseases. So it's important to harvest fruit at the proper maturity. Now, if you're moving fruit and say you're keeping stuff in storage, you'll want to be moving out the fruit that is more mature. So that's not the fruit you're going to want to be keeping in storages, in the cold storage for the long run. So you want to be moving those fruit fast, the fruit that are most mature. The third point is bruised or wounded fruit are going to be really susceptible to post-harvest rots. I mentioned about blue mold being its main entry point. The fungus's main entry point is a wound or some kind of weakness on the fruit, even like a bruise. So be mindful of how you're harvesting and how you're picking your fruit and how you're transferring your fruit from the bag to the bin. The fourth point is inoculum sources for rot pathogens causing disease in storage. They're typically coming from plant or soil debris. And so it's important to be using clean bins. So limiting the leaves or leaves going into the bin, the dirt on the bottoms of the bin. So just really being mindful of the debris that is being carried in on the bin. The fifth point is being mindful of the warm temperatures. Warm temperatures encourage pathogens to grow. So if you're able to keep your fruit cool at harvest, whether it's keeping the bins in the shade or moving them quickly from the, basically in the middle of the orchard to a shady spot, that will definitely help you out. And then the last point is, if you're delivering to the pack house, being mindful of minimizing the time between harvest and delivery of fruit. And also, again, you're worried about your fruit getting to the pack house, but sometimes the pack houses, they may have a bumper crop this year, so they're going to have to get creative with how they are managing their bins. So not everything may get into the cold storages right away. They may have to sit outside. So when they're sitting outside, they're going to be vulnerable to the elements, vulnerable to the temperatures. If you have that pre-harvest fungicide spray on, that will go a long, long way as far as helping the packers. Not only helping the packers, but helping you as far as getting your money's worth out of your fruit. So just be mindful of that. And also, as far as just mentioning about post-harvest fungicides, if folks are using post-harvest fungicides, there are a few that work. The big ones that work are fludeoxonil, which comes as Scholar, and then pyrimethanol, which comes as Pembotech. These are often used in dump tanks. They're fogging. You can use them as foggers. So these are there. That's it. Those are the ones. There is another one, Myrtec, which is thiabendazole. Myrtec basically is ineffective against the blue mold fungi because of the high level of resistance. We have anywhere from like 30 to 50% resistance of the blue mold species that are out there, populations that are out there, and they're resistant to Myrtec. So you may want to be cautious of using Myrtec in your cold storages if you're thinking of a post-harvest fungicide. And then the last thing I will mention, and I probably should have mentioned this earlier, when we're thinking about other issues that can occur, in addition to rots, is sooty blotch and fly speck. So this is my public service announcement for sooty blotch and fly speck. As far as you can still get new infections in September. If it's really, really wet, you will still get infections in September. So stay vigilant on those fungicide sprays for those later cultivars, because you can still get fresh infections well into September. And I've seen that happen firsthand with my orchards. So nothing there at the end of August, but by October, boom, all my Fuji had sooty blotch and fly speck. So just as be mindful of those diseases. Those are superficial diseases, but they can affect fruit quality and the longevity of keeping good fruit in storage. So just as be mindful of that. So that's all I have to say. Don, any questions that may have popped up while you were listening?
No, sounds good. I'm glad you brought up the sooty blotch and fly speck late season, because was that 2019 that
or
we saw?
28? Yeah, a couple years in a row.
Yeah.
Definitely in 2018 we saw it, but I think I also saw it, and I think I see it just about every year, because our Septembers, the exception of maybe one or two, have been very, very wet. So it's a sneaky. Those are sneaky diseases.
Yeah, I just remember it being a big problem a couple years ago.
Yeah.
So.
And speaking of sooty blotch, one other public service announcement, because I got this question recently. Okay, and this is also Greg's terrain. Pearsilla, when it's infesting pears, it's pooping out honeydew, and on honeydew it grows this black mold called sooty mold. Sooty mold and sooty blotch are two different things. Because I got into a heated debate with someone as far as, well, can I just use fungicides to control sooty mold? And they were thinking it was the same fungus as sooty blotch. Unfortunately, we've got two very similar sounding conditions. One's a legit disease. One is superficial. Well, actually, they're both superficial, but one is a disease. The other one only occurs because of the Pearsilla. So no, you can't use the same fungicides to control the sooty mold. The only way to control sooty mold is to control the Pearsilla. So that is, I just want to kind of put that out there for clarification when people hear sooty blotch.
Cool. Thanks, Kari.
All right.
All right, Dr. Krawczyk. What about some late season peach and early apple entomology discussion.
Well, I would say that we have really two big things going on, which are really separated and can be treated at the same time. Let's start with the one that I think it's easier, not necessarily for everybody, but I hope this will be something that any comments I make may or may not be applicable to every operation. We're talking about codling moth and oriental fruit moth. As long as the moths are being detected in the pheromone traps that are in the orchard, it means the female can stay lay eggs, the eggs will still hatch, and they can enter the fruit. Why is this important? Oriental fruit moth and codling moth have a quite different biology, and part of those differences is codling moth will stop flying probably by mid-September. Everything is weather dependent. Why oriental fruit moth will be flying until probably mid-October. If the fruit are harvested, then it doesn't matter that they're flying. However, especially on the cultivars, like Fuji or Gold Rush or Pink Lady that will be in the orchard for a very long time, those eggs will still hatch and they will produce larvae that will go into the fruit. And those really are most likely the one that you will be finding, hopefully not, but the one that can be found in fruit after harvest. At this moment, and we are in the middle of August, we are on the peak flight of the codling moth and oriental fruit moth. However, the good part is that if there was a good management applied earlier on for the earlier generations, this generation should be small and should not create many problems. I'm getting trap data from different locations across the states, and unfortunately, I do see, numbers in 10, 20s in the traps. If we're catching that many moths in the trap, it means we have to continue providing a protection to the fruit. So the larvae that will hatch from the eggs actually will not end up in fruit, in harvested fruit. There's not a silver bullet here. Depending on what was used at the controlling earlier generations, we should rotate the products. And rotation really is, right now, we really have two very effective group of products that are working and few that should be helpful, but a little bit less effective. The most important group at the moment are diamides. Diamides, when I say diamides, it's basically Altacor, Exirel, Verdeprim. I'm not talking about the mixtures because those mixtures actually don't have, they have a long pHI and they shouldn't be used right now. But if you did not use Altacor, Exirel, Verdeprim, Voliam, Besiege, or Mimecto for the control of the first generation codling moth or first and second oriental fruit moth, then it is a good time to use them now. If you did, your only option is to now using delegate. Luckily, we do have option for multiple application of those products, but the important part is do not use products from the same group to consecutive generations. Why I'm saying this and stressing this right now, maybe more than we ever did in the past, although we talk about it every time, is we do see some resistance to diamides in some orchards. It appears that it's not widespread. We were fortunate to collect 7 or 8 new population of codling moth from across the state and started doing bioassays. And when last year we collected populations, every single one of them was actually resistant. This year, the 3 populations that we tested are not resistant to diamides, which is a good sign, which means those products still should work and should provide a good control. So taking into account the PHIs, probably, and if you have traps and you know that you had a problem and you know that they are flying right now, applications of either delegate or Altacor / Verdeprim / Exirel, probably at least until mid-September, maybe even late September, it's weather dependent, might be on the table and something that some people should consider. Kari already mentioned that this is not a time to really drive the sprayer into the orchard, but if the pressure is heavy, I mean, you really have to think about it. And remember that as long as you catch them in the trap, it means they will mate, the female will lay eggs, and the larvae will be entering the fruit. So keeping active residue is important. Delegate has 7 days, Verdeprin is 7 days, Altacor is 5, Exirel is 3 days, PHI. So that might be important if you have blocks with the mixed cultivars when the products, when different cultivars will be harvested at different time. I would say that each one of those products will give, assuming a normal weather, not pouring rain all the time, at least 2, maybe even more weeks of residual control. So this is something also to think about when you decide that you need or you don't need to spray. Again, if you don't have them in the traps, there is no need to spray. It's very simple. The traps are effective. If they are not coming to the traps, it means they are not in the orchard and there is no need to spray. So you might be done for the season, at least from this perspective. So that's the important part. And now the second part that I mentioned, the second part that really have to, again, be assessed based on the traps are brown marmorated stingbug. And this is something that, we're dealing with for the last 12, 13 years, depends where are you located. I mean, Southeast would be last 15 years. Bedford or Adams would be last 10 years, basically, or 11. But the point is, brown marmorated stingbug, this is the time, mid-August, when they start moving in the big numbers into orchards. Why is this important? Like with codling moth, oriental fruit moth, you actually can predict what's going to happen in the fall based on what you have seen back in May, June, July. With the brown marmorated stingbug, this is basically impossible because they are moving from the outside, they're moving from the woods, they're moving from the wild vegetation, and this movement will continue at least until mid-October. I mean, you will see first one going to the overwintering sites sometime after September 20th. Again, those dates are plus minus. It doesn't mean that on the 19th you won't see any, or you on 21st you will see a lot of them. But the point is, right now we have all possible instars of the BMSB in the orchard. They are eggs, they are young nymphs, old nymphs, and adults. The ones that are moving to the orchards are adults. And those nymphs are developing still in the woods. And as they keep developing, the quality of the fruit, of the food in the woods will decline because, the trees will get into the fall mode when orchards will represent a perfect, table with the food, a perfect feeding sites. And that's when they will be moving to the orchard. Again, not every orchard will be affected, not every location, and not all the time. If you didn't do trapping yet, it's still time to put the traps on the borders of the orchard just to detect the movement. The lures are very effective. The traps are effective. So if you don't see them, it means you don't have a problem. And not everyone will have a problem. But when you put the traps and you start catching 5, 10, 15 a week, it means they are moving, they are in the orchard. And it's much easier to see them on the trap than try to find them looking at the fruit or foliage. If you see them coming, if you see them moving into the orchard, there is very limited assortment of products, insecticides that you can use. They are basically coming from two groups. One group is pyrethroid. The other one are neonicotinoids. Pyrethroids, you have Brigade, you have Belay, and you have Danitol. Brigade and Danitol have 14 days PHI, Belay has 7 days PHI. From neonicotinoids, you have only Assail or Admire Pro, and both of them with 7 days PHI. In the past, we also used to have the Venom and Scorpion, but the availability was based on the Section 18 emergency registration, which we don't have for the last 3 years, I think. And right now, you can still use Venom and Scorpion if you're trying to protect your peaches from stink bug, but not on apples. Venom and Scorpions are not registered for using on apples. It's very important to remember about it. How long you're gonna spray? Again, it might be cultivar dependent, location in the orchard, and the most importantly, how long the fruit will be on the trees and what kind of pressure they will be exposed to. Brigade is a pyrethroid, 14-day PHI, will provide you with the longest residual activity. And this is something to remember, that if you know that this is last time you're gonna spray, and you know you might have a problem or you had the problem in the past, using Brigade as the last spray, I don't know, mid-September to protect the fruit until they're harvested by mid-October might be the best option. Belay, Danitol, Assail, Admire, they will not, I'm sorry, Belay is neonicotinoid, but they will not give you that long residual activity. This is something to remember, but again, you may or may not need it. Everything is conditional here, but if you have traps, it becomes obvious what needs to be done. If you don't trap, there might be a problem. So still, if you can put the traps out, and this might save you a lot of money or save you a lot of troubles, or actually create a lot of work if you have to spray. It depends. From those of you that try to go more organic, for the stink bug, your only options are natural pyrethrum. So this will be product like Pygenic, like Azera. Those are really the only ones that can be used from the organic perspective. They are effective, but they have very short residual, less than a week. For codling moth, oriental fruit moth, the softer options are, of course, granulosis virus, which can be applied, up to the day of harvest, but this product works only for 7 days. Doesn't matter what rate you use. Or the other option is something that I'm still a little bit uncertain about, the product called Spare Lab. It is a peptide. It is a product that's supposed to kill the larva after the larva ingested, and it will kill the larva after some time. Using Spare Lab at this time of the season still will end up with the injuries on fruit because of the time between the product is applied and the time the product actually killed the larva. The larva is still feeding. So you will not see the live larva after it, but you will see the injuries, which will be, a frass or something of codling moth on the fruit. So those are the big two things, codling moth and oriental fruit moth. The connector between those two, between codling moth and brown marmorated stinkbug, is the trapping. If you have traps, you will know what needs to be done. If you don't have trap, well, you just making assumption that may or may not be correct. So this is important. It's too late to put really codling moth traps right now, but for the stinkbug, this is the last call to put them out, and they still will work. And stinkbug, we collect them at least until mid-October, sometime late October in the traps. And as long as we collect them in the traps, it means that they will be looking for the fruit. And another thing is that, they can move, they can fly long distances. So, if you harvested a block, but next to it is another block that still have fruit, well, make sure that those fruit are protected. That's something that sometimes is important. So that's all I have. Again, there are a whole bunch of smaller things. If you use neonicotinoids, you will actually also take care of the leaf hoppers that sometimes can be very big nuisance during the harvest, especially for the pickers and stuff like that. But those are minors compared to the injuries that codling moth can cause with the larvae being in, or oriental fruit moth, the same deal, or BMSB, which actually might make your fruit, well, only juice quality if the injury is too obvious. So that's all I have. Thank you, Dan.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. That was a good update. I think that'll get folks set up pretty good for the end of the year here. Coming towards the end of the year. All right, that's all I've got. We don't really have anything on the near horizon when it comes to meetings or talks or anything like that. So I'll let everyone go and get this into folks' hands or into their ears pretty soon. And thanks, Kari, and thanks, Greg, for coming on today.
Yeah, thanks, Don.
Thank you for hosting, Dan.
Yeah, of course. All right. Say goodbye, everybody.
See you later.
Bye.